So this session talks about something that you can't do without in terms of your quality organization, and that's obviously people. So this slide covers some of the questions we'll cover in the subsequent slides, in terms of how is your quality organization structured, what sort of individuals do you need, and what sort of skills do they need, what will quality organizations look like in the future in terms of addressing some of the challenges that are current, and obviously the challenges that are coming, and the changes within the industry that's driven very often by technology, and in terms of leadership styles. And we've touched on this in previous sessions in terms of what sort of attributes as a leader do you need to demonstrate to get the best out of your organization? So we look at people, and we'll look into a peek into what quality organizations would look like in the future, but also more broadly in terms of how the quality industry or the quality management industry is changing, has changed over time, and will potentially change in the years to come. Now, how you organise your quality organisation will really depend on who you ask. So essentially, there are many stakeholders and there are many individuals within your own business and external to your business that have very passionate views of how you should rearrange or arrange your quality organisation. And those voices come from the continuous improvement industry. They'll obviously come from your business partners in terms of R&D, operations, marketing, and such like. They also come from individuals that are rooted in some of the more traditional flavours of quality that sort of arose from the total quality management sort of movement over the last few decades. And obviously, the vendors of any application that involves any EQMS and electronic applications to better manage your quality, they've obviously got their own perspectives and views in terms of not only their offering, but also how their offering fits within your broader quality organisation. So all of these voices are very, very valid. They've all got very different perspectives, but in the slides that follow, really the approaches I'll describe are really based on my own experience and the experience working with Ian Wells in terms of how organisations look. Also, a review of the academic literature in terms of what is the literature telling us in terms of how the quality organisations will change over time, and what are the sort of attributes that are needed to position them for success in the years going forward. And mainly the practical application in terms of how I've seen many quality organisations as they've structured, and these organisations have been quite big organisations in terms of multinationals, but also very small organisations such as SMEs, or even sort of SMEs that are only comprised of a handful of individuals in terms of their whole organisation that has to obviously encompass manufacturing, design, but also quality. It's very often very useful to look at the current state of the organisation in terms of where it is now, and also reflecting on how it got to the position it is currently. So basically, our understanding of how we got to a position will help immensely in terms of understanding the roadblocks and the challenges you'll face in terms of what's the potential route to the destination you want to get to in terms of developing your quality organisation, and obviously your QMS. In terms of a roadmap, and we'll talk about roadmaps in one of the sessions later in terms of building a transformation map. But obviously, as a starting point, you need to actually assess where you are currently in terms of the environment of your quality organisation, in your quality system, in terms of its current sort of attributes and the way it behaves. Now, in terms of the quality organisation and the quality management, in industry and profession, it's basically, it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It can be traced right back to the Egyptians in terms of the concept of a royal cubit, which was one of the first measuring devices in terms of measuring distances and sizes of stone to obviously build the pyramids. And then over the years, the quality has matured and developed over the years in terms of it developed into master craftsmen in terms of many of the quality attributes you recognise in terms of inspection and manufacturing arose from there. The concept of Taylorism in terms of, which is probably the most first example of sort of modern manufacturing in terms of quality control and inspection. That led to the sort of the total quality management movement in the sort of the 1950s, and then that evolved into the concepts such as Six Sigma and eventually Lean in terms of some of the methodologies that are used within organizations currently. And really, the message here really is quality has always changed. So it's not a static process. There's no one single point in time where what we call the quality industry has become locked, and the quality profession has become locked. It's always actually changed, and there's an expectation that the quality industry and quality management will change over time. So the discussions we're having now in terms of the evolution of quality really isn't anything new. So on this slide, what I've tried to do is map out how sort of quality's evolved over time. So on the left-hand side of the slide, really you've got some of the traditional ways of managing quality in terms of it's very often focusing on inspection of defects, removal of defects, and basically quality control. So quality as a concept in sort of the early 19th century was very much focused on quality as inspection. So basically it was all about quality control, removing defects, removing bad parts, and basically cleaning up the process and ensuring that the product was actually or the output or the service of the process was adequate for the customer. And this then really moved on in terms of actually it's far better to actually design quality into the process in terms of, so there was a focus on actually can you design products that are more reliable, that can be manufactured with less defects. So it's basically a very design orientated view of quality management, and this is obviously manifests itself within the regulations and standards now in terms of design inputs, design outputs, making sure you verify those outputs and obviously you validate the device or the service against the user needs. So basically, there's a lot of rigor now currently in the standards and the regulations around designing quality into products or services. Now, this really has been supplemented with an approach where quality is very often focused on root cause analysis and experimentation and hypothesis testing and Kappa and corrective action. So all of the concepts and the approaches around Six Sigma. So this is more of a quality as an experimentation, as a sort of very engineering focused evolution of quality. So it's sort of built on the inspection aspects of quality management and obviously the design sort of focus on quality management. So this is a more experimental way of sort of applying quality. And this is really sort of evolving where we are now in terms of quality is seen as more of a discovery process in terms of you're dealing with lots of data, big data, large data sets. You're potentially using artificial intelligence to get better insights into that data. So it's a very data discovery sort of element in terms of quality management. So this slide really shows that over time, quality has sort of evolved over time, but it's also not so much replaced. Approaches have replaced previous approaches. Basically, it's sort of approaches have supplemented sort of previous ways of looking at quality and managing quality. And in parallel to this, there's really been a change in how the quality professionals and their role within industry and organisations and business. So, if you go back to the origins of quality in terms of very much an inspection process and basically quality control, here the quality professional is very much it plays out very much a policing role in terms of quality control and inspection. Basically, sorting good from bad, ensuring that individuals follow procedures, to the letter, and basically very much a policing and an enforcing role. This then moved on to a more of a softer approach in terms of quality professionals in terms of when the quality management sort of regulations and standards evolved in the 90s, then really the quality professionals became custodians of the whole of that QMS and the whole of that framework. And it sort of evolved into a more quality system approach. It wasn't just about control and inspection. It was more about looking at the whole system and obviously subparts of the quality system in terms of the different submodules. This in parallel sort of moved on to a more of an engineering approach with quality professionals in terms of a lot of the methodology that we know of currently in terms of how it often applied within manufacturing environments such as Six Sigma and Lean and root cause analysis, quality engineering, and SPC. So those are the sort of attributes, very often engineering focused. So very often when quality professionals are in this sort of sphere, they're taking a very sort of numeric, as I said, machine-like engineering focus on the world around them. So that sort of evolved from the sort of the QMS sort of systems approach, and in many ways runs in parallel with it in terms of behaviours. This really leads us to where we probably are now in terms of quality professionals. Not only using some of the methodology that I described in a few seconds ago in terms of engineering approaches, and I covered in the previous module, but really supplementing and complementing that with sort of a softer approaches in terms of a quality professional is more of an enabler of change. It takes a more systems thinking approach. It's more focused on continuous improvement and moving the world to a better position, and the manufacturing environment and the organisation and the service you provide to the customers to a better position. It's more around data analysis that's not only focused on numeric data, but also looking at more sort of narrative approaches in terms of understanding data, and often a very sort of more collaborative servant leadership style in terms of the behaviours of quality professional. So you can see over time that as the quality management movements changed, the role and the attributes of quality professionals has changed over time, and that's an ongoing conversation which we'll cover in the following slides. Now, given that there's no real mandate to say how you need to organise your quality organisation in terms of the individuals who need you and the structure, it's not so much Wild West, but there's few rules of how you have to structure your organisation. So basically, the regulations and standards don't really talk about that in terms of structure and departments and what roles you need. Basically, they say these are the standards, these are the regulations. How you meet this, how you fulfil this requirement is really up to you, and it will obviously depend on the size of your organisation. It will depend on the industry you're in, and it will obviously depend on sort of your economic challenges and the specific circumstances of your own industry. In certain industries, there's a requirement for the quality function to be independent of manufacturing. So there's often an individual that's actually independent of operations and in terms of the approval and release of product. But aside from that sort of regulatory mandate, there's real no guidance at all of how big a quality organisation should be, what are the sort of attributes it needs to have, and as I said, that will often depend on your specific circumstances. But some of the content in the following slides will give you hopefully some help in terms of how you could structure your organisations to meet your needs now, and obviously the challenges that are obviously coming. Now, if you look at the quality professional in terms of the broader quality function or organisation, and then trying to sort of peek into a quality group within a business, you start to see flavours of quality, different forms, different specialisms in terms of quality management. So you very often see a group that's dedicated to management of supplier quality, and in a group that's really focused on the regulations and such like in terms of regulatory. You may have a group that's looking at compliance against the standards and the regulations in terms of procedures and processes within the organisation. Very often you'll have a subgroup that's really focused on documentation control and related to that, how change is managed and controlled within the organisation. You may even have a group that's very focused on validation, and very often you'll have a group that's purely focused, very often very closely associated with operations in terms of controlling quality, in terms of quality assurance and release. And very often you have a group, very often called quality engineering, which has sort of flavors all of these groups at times. And obviously with specialism, that's really, really useful because you have groups that are actually very focused on one aspect of quality. That can come at a bit of a frustration to operational partners when you talk about somebody who's within the quality function. They're unaware of the different sort of flavors within quality, and very often become frustrated in that one individual within quality can't sort of speak with all of these different voices. So this, even though specialism has actually helped organizations as we've sort of broken it down, and the quality system, the quality organisation has evolved with time, along the sort of expectations of complex systems in terms of they evolve. That sort of evolution hasn't always helped organisations in terms of how it interfaces with other functions, which very often don't see these different variants of quality. They really only in their mind only see one individual is quality, and why can't they answer all of these, or answer all of my questions? And that can cause a degree of frustration for when they want an individual to sign off say a release of product, and they ask an individual that's in the change control function. Obviously, they don't have those attributes and those skills to do that, and that can cause a degree of angst within the interface between the quality organization and other stakeholder groups. Now, if you just look at one single sort of variant of quality within an organization, and very often you have a group which is called quality engineering. And different organizations will have the same group, they'll call it the same name, but the role and purpose of this group will be very dependent on the organization you look at. And so in certain organizations, the quality engineering group is very much seen as custodians of the quality management system. They basically maintenance and run the QMS. In other organizations, this group is purely focused on how non-conforming product is controlled. So basically, their job is to basically disposition product when it fails, and how you control potential product that's actually defective. If you look at some organizations, this group very often is actually sort of custodians of the continuous improvement methodology. So the root cause analysis and all of that good stuff we covered in the previous sessions, they would be the natural home of sort of quality improvement and continuous improvement within the organization. So basically, the same group across different businesses can look very, very different, and you really need to decide what you want your group to look like in terms of its role and its messaging and its function. And however, you will need to actually sort of work out how the different variants of quality in terms of continuous improvement, in terms of compliance, in terms of controlling non-conforming product, in terms of running the quality system, how are you going to cover all of those bases within your quality organization? So it's less important how you do that. It's more important that you actually do make sure all of those areas are actually covered, and you've got individuals that are directly responsible for the running, maintenance, and also the improvement activities of that part of the QMS. Now, the flip side of this lack of structure within quality organisations is essentially you've got a very broad canvas to paint on. So how you basically build your quality organisation to meet the needs of the QMS and meet the needs of your customers is really up to you. In terms of comparing quality professionals with other professionals, it's long been noted within the literature that there's a weaker sense of self-identity of individuals that work within the quality professional compared with other professions such as lawyers and solicitors and the finance, for example. And the reason for that is individuals come into quality from lots of different areas, and very often it's not through a professional certification, though that there is a growing trend for such academic qualifications as an entry into the quality profession. Very often, if you look at a quality organisation, it will have individuals from a huge range of different inputs in terms of where they're coming from. And this has resulted in a variability of approach in a field that is, as we said, can be interpreted multiple ways. So basically, there's a lot of room for, in terms of the individuals that feed into your quality organisation. And obviously, we've just said, you've got large sort of remit to how you structure your quality organisation yourself. Now, in terms of qualifications, I've touched on, few children at school say, actually, I want to work in the quality profession. That is very, very rare. Mostly individuals come in by other disciplines. A lot of individuals come through manufacturing. They come through R&D. Personally, I came through an R&D, a technical. My background is a biochemist, and I moved into quality probably about 30 years ago. So a lot of individuals who, like myself, are coming from very technical areas. Very often they're coming through engineering. And one general theme is very often the individuals that come into quality come into the sort of profession from areas which are very engineering based. So very often, if you look at the sort of the qualifications of individuals, it tends to be sort of science based. It tends to be engineering. It tends to be in certainly medical devices. It tends to be sort of the biomedical area, and less so in terms of if you look at arts and humanities, you don't tend to get a lot of people with sort of English literature degrees and such like. Though I do know a number of individuals who have those qualifications within quality, so it's not an impediment. In fact, it helps immensely, and we'll come on to that in terms of a different perspective. But generally, individuals come into the professional from areas where there's qualifications in sort of very sort of scientific, rigorous areas such as physics and biology and engineering and such like. And as I said, there's a growing sort of movement towards degrees and diplomas in quality becoming more popular, and certainly within the healthcare industry. Very often, if you look at the leadership of many of the medical device companies and the medtech companies, very often the quality individual, if you actually drill back down through their sort of their history, their career history in LinkedIn, you'll find out a lot of them are basically got degrees in biochemistry and pharmacy and engineering and all of that stuff. So very few of them are actually sort of have got qualifications at the beginning of their careers in quality, even though they may have sort of supplemented that over the years with other quality sort of diplomas and certificates. So in summary, there's huge scope to how you organise your quality organisation, and there's huge scope to individuals you can choose from in terms of how that you recruit them and attract them into your top quality group. So this section really talks now about not specifically around the quality organisation, but how the challenges of organizations in terms of recruiting the best individuals and the most appropriate individuals to meet the challenges. So some of the challenges are very specific to the quality organization, but very often the challenges are very generic across industry. One of the general themes and very consistent messages in business today is that the belief that virtually all modern organizations operate in what is known as a knowledge-based economy. So basically, organizations compete for individuals with the best intelligence and qualifications, and these sort of knowledge workers, basically, they endeavor to support your business, and basically their craft and their understanding to sort of use knowledge actually gives you a competitive advantage. And this has led to a general belief that individuals that can sort of manipulate information and understand how to move data will actually be best placed in the organization today and going forward. And basically, when you look at the landscape of organizations, you see a whole myriad of knowledge-based sort of companies. However, from various studies that have been performed, that very often that's not the case. Very often you find that when you look at individuals within organizations, they're not all knowledge-based workers at all. Very often, as we'll come on to, a lot of individuals are doing things that are actually quite menial and quite sort of trivial and basically doing activities that are actually quite below where their academic qualifications. And we'll touch on that. So the idea that there's this big knowledge industry out there is a bit of a mirage, and even within companies such as IBM, if you drill down into that organization, you do find a lot of individuals doing quite mundane jobs in terms of data analysis and working on call centers and such like. There's very little or less so in terms of the sexier things in terms of big data analysis, and a lot of the sort of the meat within organizations is, as I said, is work that's being done that's needed, but not necessarily it's the cutting edge sort of application of knowledge that was very often the expectation a number of years ago when we talked about this knowledge based economy that was going to come in the future. When we talked about it, this maybe a few decades ago. Now, we talked about the eighth waste under one of the previous sections in terms of this is the underutilization of talent, the eighth waste, and whilst the knowledge-based economy is very laudable and the aspirations of this, as I said, a lot of individuals are not really using their intellectual power in terms of the ability to do things based on their training and experience. So very often individuals are working on tasks that are actually far below their competence to actually execute them. So basically, so for example, if you take a diagnostic lab within a release lab within a large sort of multinational med tech company, if you go back 20, 30 years, very often the individuals working in that laboratory would be school leavers. They had done their A levels, they would have got some qualifications, they may have gone to technical college, but generally they were entry level from schools, and they were trained up within the industry and were basically within the company from day one when they were very, very young, and they advanced their careers obviously over time. If you look at the same laboratory now in terms of the skill sets, very often you'll have individuals doing quite say mundane tasks, but sort of tasks that don't really stretch them, but they will actually have qualifications. Very often they'll have degrees, some of them have masters, and many of them will have PhDs. So basically, when you look at the sort of the skill level within industry, very often you find that the entry level many years ago was far lower than the entry level it is now, and that's not really always a reflection of technology has advanced in leaps and bounds over the years. To a great extent is that we're not utilising the skill sets that we've got within organisations in terms of the competence and the experience and the knowledge that individuals have. So in terms of this discussion about are people sort of batting to their strengths in terms of their experience and their qualifications, are you really using them in terms of your organisation as a leader responsible for a quality organisation? Does this really matter? And the answer is yes. So really you need to question in terms of people management. So on the right hand side, there are lots of attributes of people management in terms of getting the best out of your organisation and individuals specifically. So it's a very multifaceted in terms of endeavour, in terms of the whole sort of competence needed to do that. So people management is a huge area of importance, which we won't even sort of touch on in this session. But in terms of quality management and building a quality organisation, one of the things you need to ensure is actually people are actually being valued, and they're making valid contributions to deliver customer value. So basically, are they actually using all of their qualifications and experience appropriately? And are they doing tasks that are adding value for the customers of the QMS? Are they using their skills appropriately? And also, are they being developed? So basically, when you come into employment, you don't expect to do the job and actually you'll be paid and that's it. Very often there's an expectation you develop individuals because you're investing in their future and basically investing in capability that you will need down the line in terms of individuals that will succeed other higher positions within the organisation. So there's a lot of this marry between succession management and personnel development is very, very important. So in terms of experience and qualifications, this is really about really discussing what are the sort of skills you need, what are the competencies you need within your business. One very important thing is you really, in some way within your quality organisation, you need individuals who have a direct experience in using your products as customers. So this is really, really invaluable. So if you're a medtech company, if they've actually worked in hospitals using the equipment, using the diagnostics that you manufacture, that is really, really invaluable. So basically, you need to ensure at least you have some individuals within your quality organisation that actually have this skill and sort of competence. And also, it helps if you recruit from other non-technical disciplines. So very often you can have a quality organisation that's very, very swayed in terms of one technical proficiency. So really, I encourage you to sort of dilute that out with a more diverse sort of framework in terms of, very often it helps if you rotate individuals within your company from other functions. So if you get if individuals come from operations or from R&D, or even sort of sort of left field in terms of coming from marketing, coming from other areas, you wouldn't naturally think in terms of could they have a role within quality. So the answer to that is yes, because I think a lot of the competencies that are behaviours that are very successful in other functions are very transferable into the quality environment. There's also a degree of expertise you need that's very specialised, that you really have to sort of bring in on a case by case basis in terms of knowledge of stats, in terms of data analysis, information technology. Do not feel at all you can always grow this in-house in terms of very often you've got an individual that's sort of the in-house expert that's sort of self-taught. This is great, but very often sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and actually, if you need a statistician, very often you need to get somebody that's actually actually, done a maths degree, done a master's in statistics, and applied statistics in order to bring that competency in-house. So very often you can delude yourself by thinking, actually, we can sort of cover this in-house with our own individuals, but very often you've got to, as I said, you've got to bite the bullet and pay for that competence to get that specialist knowledge within your organization. And finally, it's very important to actually bring in different perspectives, and very often different views, as I said in the previous sessions, are really going to help you get to the best answers and get to the best solutions, and be able to ask the right questions in terms of one of the ways your quality system and quality organization needs to move forward to better meet the needs of your customers. And in terms of behaviours, in terms of what are the behaviours of individuals within your quality organisation that you want, these are some of the behaviours I think are really really help in terms of working within a quality organisation. You need individuals that like to ask questions, are inquisitive. Obviously, individuals that want to work together in sort of collaborative fashion. Very important aspect is pragmatism in terms of making quality decisions, in terms of making a pragmatic decision on any balance based on the balance of risk versus benefit. Related to that, they've got to be calm and level-headed. Basically, you want individuals that can make decisions in a sort of calm manner. You want individuals that are committed to your product and your service and your industry and your customers, but also individuals can take a step back. That they've got a big picture orientation in terms of competency, but also you'd like individuals that have a great attention to detail. Ideally, you want individuals that are very self-aware, so they understand how their role within the organisation, but also understand their sort of weaknesses and areas they need to work on, but also understand that the things that they're very good at and need to exploit. And obviously, empathy in terms of understanding the needs of the business, the needs of your customer are really important. And it's virtually impossible to get an individual that's got all of these sort of behaviours sort of manifesting themselves all at the same time with equal strength. It's just, people aren't that rounded. So you really need to have a mix of different personality types. So you've got a mixture of these different behaviours. But generally, this is the list I picked from in terms of I had to build the perfect individual that would flourish within a quality environment, but also really help your business. These are the sort of behaviours I'd sort of choose from. So we talked earlier in the previous slide about how the quality profession and the quality management is changing over time, and that really is driving different behaviours within a quality professional. So on the left-hand column, you've got sort of the old sort of behaviours you'd see within the quality profession, and on the right-hand side, the new sort of new way of thinking, or certainly new way of behaving. So years ago, it's very factory-facing. You're looking at the production line. Now it's more about, are you facing the customer? Are you asking the customer? Are you understanding the customers? Previously, it was all about processes in terms of process thinking. Now it's about systems thinking and complexity thinking. So that covers some of the content in previous sessions. Very often, quality control was very dispassionate. It was basically you hit a clipboard and you separated good from bad. Really, I mean, you can be passionate as a quality professional in terms of your connection with the customers and the products you do. So it's not unheard of to feel a bit of passion within the quality group in terms of that you're connecting yourself to end customers, making big changes to their lives. We discussed about the old sort of ways of working in terms of policing. So very often an enforcer that is being replaced with the role of the quality professional is more of a mentor and a coach, and basically teaches and instructs as opposed to just enforcing. The old position where the quality professional was just really good at understanding data. Really, the quality professional going forward, it understands that data and how to humanize it and how to explain it and how to put that data in the context of your organization, and also in the context of how your customers use the product. And very often with very big data sets in terms of getting clues in terms of how the data's used, how the products and services are used in the real world. Very often an attribute of a quality profession years ago, it was very, very uncomfortable with uncertainty. It was a very black and white world that individuals like to work in. You separated good from bad. It was a tick box exercise. But the real world that quality professionals have to work in now is that you flourish, and you need to flourish in the times of complete uncertainty. So basically, all of the complexity sort of environment that we discussed in the previous sessions, you need individuals that are going to be quite comfortable living in a world like that. Um, Years ago, there was a very compliance focus in terms of the expectations of the quality professionals, and very often compliance was basically viewed above all other aspects of the quality organisation. It was basically the sole purpose of the quality professional to ensure compliance to regulations. Now it's more about putting your customers' needs first, understanding your customers in terms of that, and related to that is that basically the role of the quality professional was very often police stakeholders. They would be the individual that check on manufacturing, check R&D, we're doing the right thing, etc. But now it's more about the quality professional partnering with stakeholders. So there's a more collaborative sort of interactive connection between the different groups in terms of how they behave, in terms of the role of the quality profession is very often that it should be seen as a servant relationship with the other functions in terms of meeting their needs. But obviously there are aspects of a quality profession where you have to give some very sort of direct advice in terms of direction. So it's not always this cozy sort of loving between the different between the quality professional and the stakeholders they're servicing. But it's done in this sort of spirit of you're basically trying to move the organization forward and make the appropriate decisions with your customers' needs in mind. So that covers sort of basically some of the attributes of how a quality professional would actually behave in terms of the attributes, and obviously it's changing over time in terms of it's becoming a bit more touchy feely. It's less sort of engineering focused in terms of separating good from bad, and it's more about relationships and understanding and collaboration. Just to ground it a bit, I mean one of the studies that was done in the late 80s was actually analysis of US corporate life, actually. And basically, Robert Jackal went into hundreds of different organizations across America, and he tried to boil down, the managers talked to them, and he boiled it down to, when managers said, what's the rule for managerial success? And he basically distilled it down to sort of 5 general rules that managers basically rules they follow, but they don't necessarily articulate to the broader world. So basically, if your manager wants us to be successful, they would the one rule was never go around your boss. And basically, if the boss claims they want something that wants a diverse environment and wants dissenting views, but essentially at times you always basically got to tell your boss what they want to hear. And the third rule was basically if your boss wants something to stop happening, then basically it stops, and that's the end of the discussion. And the role of the manager, if he or she wants to be successful, is to anticipate their boss's needs, and such that the boss doesn't have to behave like a boss. And the final rule is you do what the job requires, and sometimes you just got to shut your mouth. So even though all of the conversation I talked about earlier in terms of the sort of the needs of a quality professional to be more reflective, to be more sort of articulate, to be more sort of softer in terms of the interactions with their stakeholders around themselves. There's obviously overlaid the reality of managerial life in terms of working with any industry. Now, in response to that, it's really this. I show this just so you're aware of it. So very often, some of the unhidden rules of how managers progress through organisations aren't totally aligned with some of the messaging in previous sessions in terms of individuals need to be reflective and need to be diverse and at times need to take a stand back and not make a decision, need to understand the complex environment. Some of that sort of attributes which are really, really important do actually sort of start to rub up against the reality of how the real works in terms of managers' progression and individuals' progression within organisations. So I just mentioned that just the way around that is really just to recognise it happens, and you, as an individual, as a manager, as a leader, you've got to sort of understand this tussle that's happening within yourself and also within your managers and direct reports, as on an ongoing basis as they try to enact some of this training and make it real. They will have a bit of internal conflict, and it will go against maybe one of the 5 or more than one of the 5 unhidden rules of how you progress through organizations. Now, training is very much the poor cousin of the quality system, but really is the bedrock of everything in terms of having simple processes that are clearly described is not enough. You need to train individuals, and this is especially the case for steps that are critical to manufacturing and have an impact of quality and safety of products. And basically, you need to actually not just train individuals; they've got to demonstrate they understand your training and they're able to actually carry out tasks appropriately. So, training is really the bedrock of the whole of the quality system. Now, training needs is nothing new. So, the training within industry is a concept that goes back to the Second World War in terms of there was a requirement to train a lot of people really, really quickly. So, the approaches that were sort of constructed in response to the Second World War and obviously that urgency are equally applicable to today. So training within industry as a concept is actually having a bit of a renaissance, but it's really based on four key attributes, which really sort of underpin how powerful this concept and approach was in the Second World War, but also how it can be applied to modern organisations. So, in terms of training within industry as a concept, it's basically simple. It's focused on getting the job done. So there's no extra fluffy bits in terms of the training. It's not training for training's sake. It's showing you how to do the job and how to do it correctly. It's focused on training with the minimum of training time. Obviously, when there's a war on, basically you don't want to spend lots of time training people. You want to go off and sort of enacting the output of that training. So the focus is on expediting the training in terms of getting individuals to a level of competence very quickly. It's very often focused by not just sitting in a classroom or reading a book or reading a procedure. It's actually learning by doing, actually doing the thing in the real world. And the big power of training with industry is that once you're trained, you actually go away and you train somebody else. So there's this sort of like a cascade effect. There's a sort of you get a critical mass and a sort of a waterfall effect in terms of you begin to train other individuals, and those individuals, once they become competent, train other individuals. So as a concept, training with industry, it's really worth going back and just looking at your training programs and are they aligned with the aspirations and the requirements of that framework in the Second World War. So even though it's old, it's very, very powerful, and it translates very well in terms of the need for training individuals in a modern setting. Now, in terms of training, we talked about you just not only do you have to train individuals, you have to check that they understand that training and they're obviously competent. And this just generated within quality circles a whole degree of confusion in terms of training and assessment and competence. In terms of how often do you need to actually assess individuals versus just telling them to read the procedure. And really it's based on proportionality, based on risks. So not every change in every document requires extensive training and assessment. And it's otherwise the whole organisation will collapse under the sheer weight of training you will be doing. So for procedures that do not impact the product directly, such as changes to policies, it might be important to deliver the training, but there's no real need to check the competence of understanding. And furthermore, minor changes to documents may only require the document to be read and understood and don't require you to go to a training module or a training session. And really, you've got to be pragmatic about the level of training you actually need to employ, and it's going to be, and the extent of training, and it's really going to be based on the risk of the issue. Use a variety of means. I mean, obviously, in the Second World War, there weren't videos, and there weren't sort of you weren't able to actually do all of the things that you can do now in terms of sort of multimedia and online training and virtual reality. So basically, your scope to use different media during your training is far broader today. So in terms of training, in terms of whether you need to deliver the training or you need to obviously deliver the training or assess individuals, this really be dependent on the risk level of the change you're making, and obviously how important that is in terms of the impact on the end customer. So in this slide on the left hand side, you've got changes to the QMS. So on the left hand side of the QMS slide, you've got things that are changes to production process, changes to key regulations. So they have strong potential to impact the customer in terms of patient safety or your compliance status. So then that really drives a requirement to deliver the training, in person, and basically it tests the individual to understand they understand the training and they understand the delivery of the training. There are changes that are actually you need to deliver the training, but you don't necessarily need to test them in terms of changes that don't impact products and products and systems and services that impact your end user and patient. So there'll be changes to policies. If there's a policy change, you may have to deliver that training to make everybody aware, but you don't have to test them to say, do you understand what I've just told you? You know, that seems a bit stupid. And obviously the other sort of level below that is where you don't have to deliver the training or test them. So minor changes to documents. So make sure within your training sort of management, you don't try to deliver training and test the competence of the training for every single aspect of changing the QMS. Because as I said, you will simply not be able to function in terms of you'll be overloaded with training. Another aspect is there are softer skills that are not part of the QMS, which actually it really is really important that you start to deliver that training to increase the competence and the capability of your staff. So there are softer skills that very often are forgotten in terms of um, you know training and development in terms of uh, delivery. So things like the ability to individuals to write reports that are clear, to actually manage projects, to actually to run a meeting and facilitate a meeting and chair a meeting, how to present data, how to influence in terms of influencing skills in terms of this potentially having difficult discussions with some of your stakeholders, the ability to think quite critically and take a step back. So these softer skills are really important. They're as important as some of the harder skills within your QMS, and really you should really sort of consider that actually broadening the range of training. But very often on the right hand side, very often it's neither delivered and it's neither tested. And basically on the right hand side of the slide, very often it's never discussed at all. It never gets onto the radar of the quality organisation. But really, in terms of its importance, but really what I'm saying is you have to start as a quality leader within your organization, start rolling out training that's not just about changes, but it's about improving the capability of your organization going forward. So really the soft skills are really as important, as I said, as to the technical skills around creativity, collaboration, adaptability, the ability to make the right decisions. It is the concept of emotional IQ in terms of you've got a high EQ in terms of your emotional um, so Scott. So really the soft skills are really as important, as I said, as to the technical skills around creativity, collaboration, adaptability, the ability to make the right decisions. It is the concept of emotional IQ in terms of you've got a high EQ in terms of your emotional so Scott. So soft skills are as important as obviously the technical skills, and there's a range of them in terms of creativity, collaboration, your emotional intelligence, your adaptability, your ability to make decisions, your ability to problem solve and communicate. These are really key, and they're as important as the technical skills, and in many ways more important because the technical skills are basically if you've got individuals that's very strong in a technical area but hasn't got any of these soft skills, they obviously have to they will work in essentially a vacuum and be unable to transfer those technical skills into any value that will be useful for you within your quality organization in order to fulfill your customer needs. But very often the soft skills individuals that have a range of these soft skills, very often coming in from other functions, you can to a great extent train them in the technical knowledge and technical skills. So that sort of transfer is far easier than taking somebody that's got very strong technical skills but actually hasn't got any of these soft skills. Then it's very hard. It's much harder to sort of broaden these soft skills in individuals that are very technically focused. So we covered the different ways of building your quality organization, the sort of individuals you need, the sort of experience, the sort of behaviors, what sort of training they need, and really sort of the makeup that you need in terms of your quality organization. Essentially, how you build that is really up to you, and really it starts and ends with you. So as a quality leader, you have huge influence on how people behave, and obviously you will choose individuals that come into your organization, and you will also choose whether individuals within your organization are actually best suited to be in your organization, and essentially you will get what you tolerate. So basically, if you've got an organization that hasn't got the skills that are needed, that's struggling, then you can actually do something about it. And your words and actions have massive influence on the individuals within your organization, and really sort of you need to actually use that influence such that everybody is using their best skills and endeavors to actually be relentless in the focus in terms of satisfying your customers. So basically, as a football manager of a very big football team, you have huge scope to populate that team with the best individuals with complementary and very often different and diverse skill sets. So it isn't about building a quality organization that's absolutely identical, where everybody's thinking and behaving the same. That's a really bad thing. You need a very diverse sort of environment where people have different opinions, different skills, different experiences, because that's the way you're going to really see ways to really improve your quality organization and quality system to best meet the needs of your business. So in the next section, we'll just step through, as in the previous sessions, in terms of where this sits within the sort of the maturity model. So in terms of people, so again, you've got the four levels. So basically, an organisation that's sitting unaware in terms of people, basically you're struggling to leverage the power of your individuals. You've got individuals that are very similar. There's very little diversity. Very often, staff turnover will be very low, where people just simply don't leave, or actually will be very, very high. And very often you struggle to replace them. And very often the quality organisation is very introverted and inward-looking, so there's not that collaborative interaction with other functions. And very often individuals come into quality and they stay within quality and they move up the ranks from the quality group. Very often there's limited movement out into other groups and back into your function from other other groups such as R&D and operations and such like. And this really leads to very often individuals make poor decisions, and very often they're unable to make decisions in terms of they will move that decision up the management tree in terms of, and this causes a large degree of frustration with senior management who seem to be overloaded with decisions to make, and also this frustrates your potentially frustrates your peer stakeholders, and they have to wait for that decision process to actually happen. And basically, individuals within an organisation that's sitting unaware are very unquestioning of the quality system. They basically, if anything, there's no talk about continuous improvement. Very often, continuous improvement is stifled, and really training and development is very prescriptive, and you basically learn the job basically by doing it. And there's very little succession planning. Very often there's a danger you lose knowledge as key individuals leave. And really you need to sort of improve the makeup of your organisation in terms of the individuals and how they behave. So basically, an organisation sitting unaware in terms of people really is going to struggle going forward. And all of the content I covered in previous sessions, they will struggle with because of the skill sets within their business. One of the first steps to move up the ladder in terms of is to actually do a skills audit in terms of what have you got in quality, what skills have you got, what are the competencies, what are the backgrounds, and what are the behavioural gaps you've got, and actually start to map out in terms of what are the roles and responsibilities of the individuals working within the quality function. And really sort of map out how you onboard individuals, how you train them, how you develop them, and what are the formal approaches you need to start to consider. So an organisation's moving into aware. Basically, you're beginning to get a better understanding of the gaps and your skill gaps within the organisation. Again, you're still having the same challenges of individuals, maybe the lack of diversity of individuals, and very often the decision-making process is moving up the chain, but you're beginning to understand that actually it needs to be improved, and you're beginning to actually understand the skill gaps you've got, and you're beginning to tailor sort of, what are the competencies I need to bring into to your group to actually move it forward. And really to move up to the next stage of learning, really you've got to sort of not only develop that plan, you've got to sort of make it come to life in terms of develop an active and maintained succession plan, and start bringing individuals into your organisation from different areas with different backgrounds, and really roll out some of the training we covered in the previous sessions in terms of managing risk, managing change, etc. Now, a company that's an organisation that's said that learning is beginning to be very effective in terms of managing individuals and people. There's a great degree of diversity. There's accountability at the appropriate level. Not all decisions move up the management chain. Individuals see the quality system as able to be modulated, improved, and their role in terms of making that happen. There's a more structured approach in terms of how individuals come into the quality organisation and are trained and mentored and coached, and the gaps within there are being identified and documented. And there's organisations sitting at the learning stage. There's a real feeling of growth and renewal of the quality organisation, and a more optimistic view of the quality system, the quality organisation, compared with an organisation that's sitting at unaware. Basically, that organisation is very often very pessimistic and very negative about the future. And then to move on to mastery, really, is building on some of the concepts and material I covered in the previous sessions in terms of some of the complexity thinking in terms of making decisions contingent on environment, and also bringing in individuals from the quality organisation, from other functions, really sort of encourage that to sort of increase the turnover of individuals within your organisation, and really an organisation at mastery. The quality organisation is seen as the go-to place in terms of how you develop your career and get a bit of understanding across of the broader business in terms of customer needs and how the business can actually meet those customer needs. And then at the mastery, basically, you've got all bells and whistles. Really, you've got a really highly competent workforce that's turning over at a acceptable level. Basically, as I said, an organisation sitting at mastery really it's basically the go-to place for people in terms of to learn and develop themselves. So really, this is the sort of where you'd want to get to, and obviously some of the approaches that are covered in the previous sessions will help you do that in terms of building that roadmap. And we will talk on the section on building the transformation map, how to actually interface the quality organisation with some of your peer groups, because that will be part of your transformational map in terms of how do you make that connection between your quality organisation and some of the stakeholders. So we touched on that in terms of collaboration in this session, but we'll be a bit more defined in the section on building the transformation map in terms of what does that mean in terms of the interface between your organisation and your peer stakeholders across the business. So again, basically, at mastery, it doesn't mean it's all stopping, and basically it's all completed. You have to continually invest in reassessing the gaps and behaviours you need, and obviously, circumstances change in terms of there are future challenges to the business. So this is an ongoing process going forward. So in summary, seek diversity, but allow individuals to play to their strengths. Obviously, focus on training, and invest in your people. Because, as we said at the beginning of this module, without people, it's through people you will execute the transformation of your quality organisation. It's through those individuals and behaviours and actions on a daily basis that you will actually drive the change. So in the next module, we're looking at process, and we're going to look at technology. We'll also look at the touch on the sort of the interface between those two areas and obviously people. So hopefully join us in the next module.